Hey everyone, welcome back to the White Coat Club. This is Lindsey and Nicole, and we're both counselors at MinPrep. Start preparing today. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to like and subscribe to get more BSMD and med school admission advice. All right, so we do work a lot with younger kids here at MinPrep. How do you help a kid decide what is the right test, like SAT versus ACT for them?
I think some students just assume they're going to go in and take one versus the other. They have like this inclination. But if you're starting early, especially, take practice tests in both. Do the research for both, learn a little bit more about both. I think you just have to consider what type of math and reading strengths that you have, just because it's completely different on each test. There's different levels, there's different speeds, there's different time allotments. So just kind of understanding how you are as a student, but taking both practice tests, I think, are extremely important into navigating like how you're going to ultimately come up with your test plan.
And colleges really don't have a preference for a certain test. I feel like back in the day, maybe they
Mhm.
did much more regional, like, certain areas did the SAT versus the ACT, but now that is definitely not the case. And like every single school will accept both the SAT and ACT and don't really prioritize one test versus the other. So definitely as a play to your strengths type situation.
Exactly. There's absolutely no preference there, and I totally agree with you. There absolutely was. There may be some parents listening who were like, no, this one's much better. That's what it was when I was in school. Um, which you're not wrong, but things have changed.
Yeah, I do think always like taking at the minimum like practice tests beforehand just to get the vibe of the test. Just because
Yeah.
there are different nuances and there are a ton of practice tests out there. And of course, like the SAT recently changed, the ACT changed in spring of 2025. And so a lot of things are kind of evolving with it. So just make sure that you're preparing for the right, version of the test too.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's necessarily like a right time to start studying. I do have some kids who will start really early, like honestly, like in their freshman year, taking the test and nail it. And then some take it, first or second semester of their junior year. And so colleges don't reward you for taking it earlier. But whatever your particular testing strategy is will vary. I would say you probably need at least like probably 3 to 4 months to study. Some kids need less time. Some kids do take 12 full months to study. So whatever your particular like kind of strengths are at, follow that. If you aren't planning to take it until later, definitely in like your freshman year, you should start developing some of those skills. I feel like whenever I do have a kid who's struggling with the reading portion and I ask them like, okay, do you read in your free time? Almost all of them say no, they do not. And so that could be something simple that you start in your freshman year, kind of studying without really studying. It's just developing reading skills, reading for fun, practicing maybe different math skills.
Yeah, exactly. Like doing the research of the test versus like actually studying. It's never too early to start thinking about it and like mentally preparing for it and understanding what you're going to need to do. Um, Sophomore year, at this point, you should be taking like at least a full length practice test for each at that point, trying to figure out if you want to decide between SAT, ACT, or if you want to just start testing early, take one of each. A lot of times, depending on the state that you're in, your school will mandate you to take SAT or ACT for like state funding. So sometimes they'll say, well, I really want to take the SAT, but my school's making me take the ACT. So then that'll be your extra, exam. But look at the dates. Um, for example, in a lot of states, the ACT will be offered at your school in March, and your guidance counselors and your principals and all those will tell you, oh, that's plenty of time. However, if you're applying BSMD, not so much. The rules don't always apply in that regard, in like terms of like the generic timeline. So you may want to take one of each a little bit sooner, but get with your counselor, talk to some people about what timeline works best for you.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you're going for BSMD, you should be finishing up your testing, hopefully by the start of the summer, to be honest, but by no later than the end of your summer before your senior year. The reason being is just because BSMD programs have such specific SAT or ACT requirements. And if you're below it, you can't apply. Like they will not consider you. And so
Mhm.
not very many are test optional. I think there's just like maybe not even a handful left that are test optional. And so for BSMD,
Yeah.
they are rigid. The more kind of bites of the apple you can have for testing attempts, the better. So maybe for some kids, March is totally fine, but for other kids, maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, some kids will ultimately start like true testing at the end of sophomore year. Um, the great thing about the SAT and the ACT is they publish their dates well in advance. So you'll know exactly. I mean, we can look right now to see exactly how many more tests and what the dates are for the rest of the year. Um, so look, it might align with you having to be somewhere for like a family vacation or something, So really like be mindful, get with your parents and sit down and look at the calendar and decide this is when we will be testing.
It's a great point. And sign up early too. If you,
Yes. You get discounts if you do.
oh, I didn't know that.
Sure.
My,
Well, there's like a regular registration and then there's a late registration. So
yeah.
it's cheaper if you do it by the regular registration date.
And I've had kids who like tried to get it in, especially the more popular dates. I feel like August is always quite popular because you have sophomore, like rising juniors who are taking the test and rising seniors who are both taking the test and trying to get into that August test date because they spent the summer studying. And so that one I feel in particular tends to be really popular. And I've had kids who haven't been able to get into their testing date. It doesn't happen very often. And I feel like during the pandemic, it really happened a lot, but it still does happen. So make sure to sign up early and don't leave things to chance.
Yeah, because you may have to travel. I mean, if you're not living in a super metro area, I've definitely had kids like, I can't find any testing sites within 100 miles of me because you're waiting till the last minute, like you said, for that August test, which is super popular. So, and get with your parents about it because in your head, you might be saying as a high schooler, like, oh, this is perfect. And then, in mom's head, it's like, no, that this is the day of your, sister's wedding. Hello, you can't do it that day. So, it's happened before.
Definitely has happened before. And, I think that the SAT and the ACT too is one of those things that the longer you put it off, the more pressure you put on yourself. You know that you've only got one or two test dates left to get that score. And it is not necessarily like a difficult exam. They're asking easy things in hard ways. And if you're already caught up in your head trying to like you have all this pressure on you, I think that that does make it worse. So that's why also I'm a big advocate for testing early, not too early before you're prepared. If you haven't gotten the math skills yet, there's of course no point in taking it, but whenever you are prepared, taking it and kind of planning for it early and making sure you do have enough time to get the number of test attempts that you need.
And it's just going to give you the most insight earlier on for how the rest of your application cycle is going to go.
I've had a few kids that are testing into August and then some that even do later. I had a couple kids this year actually that were testing into October of their senior year and it's so stressful.
October of junior year is like ideal.
Yeah.
August, October, junior year, ideal. August, October, senior year, not ideal.
And honestly, I don't think any of them improved their score significantly just because you have so many other things going on. You have your extracurriculars, you have college essays, you have, your schoolwork, and then of course you're trying to study for the SAT. And you probably, in order to improve, you do need to spend, 7+ hours a week studying just for the SAT if you want to make like significant score gains. And even then, it might not be enough if you haven't really significantly changed your like testing strategy. So it definitely is something that you should be planning for.
Yeah, the planning is almost just as important as like the studying.
Yeah, I feel like that really should be like our slogan here. It's planning ahead and showcase
Yeah.
passion. You can't really showcase passion so much for SAT, ACT, and that's you can plan ahead.
That's our other catchphrase. Yeah.
Okay, I know we talked a lot about like when to start preparing, but I think that the other thing too is the number of attempts that you're taking as well. Really, the goal is to take it no more than 3 times for like the SAT or the ACT. I have had kids who've done 3 attempts for the SAT and like 3 attempts for the ACT because they just figure, oh, I won't send my SAT or ACT score if they're really struggling to bring it up. But if we think about it, it's just so much time spent studying. If you are spending 7 hours, 10 hours a week studying, we could have been spending that time doing something like more productive if it was like a passion project or more volunteer time or shadowing time or whatever it might be. So testing fatigue is definitely a thing. And so ideally you putting your best attempts in early so then you can reduce the amount of times you have to retake the exam.
And I've also had students who were like, okay, well, I'll take one in like the beginning of sophomore year, and then I'll take another test in the beginning of junior year. I don't agree with spreading them out. You know, I think if you're gonna like sit down and say, okay, I'm ready to study, I'm ready to test, get your 2 or 3 tests done in like a 6-month period.
Completely agree. Yeah. Not too close that you don't have time to improve, but not so far
Yeah.
you don't have time to remember stuff. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to wait for your scores to come in and then see what you did and, like kind of revisit the drawing board a little bit and your study skills and stuff like that. But I don't I don't agree with like, oh well, I took it one sophomore year, haven't touched it in a year, and
Yes,
now I'm gonna take it again.
completely.
Um, I just don't feel like that works well on the mind. I think it turns into more of a mind game with that also.
For BSMD programs, sometimes you do have to report all of your testing scores, but a lot of the times in the Common App, you can just report which scores you wish to report. So it just depends from school to school. So they might not see like the fact that you did get like a lower score on one of them, but I mean, ideally, we are improving each and every time. We are putting our full effort into each and every testing attempt. We're not like wasting one of those attempts. And that's why I'm also like not
Yeah.
a huge proponent of like doing a practice test like cold. I have some people, I guess I shouldn't say test cold.
Like blind, going in blind,
Avoiding
right?
exactly right. I don't,
I have a lot of parents who are like, oh, we're just gonna take it like in ninth grade, just see what happens.
yeah,
They're a good student, we want to just see like their raw score. But I agree. I don't love that.
take a practice test at home. You can fake testing conditions, make them get up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, quiet in the house. They can use a calculator when they can and, do it digitally or whatever it might be, but kind of fake the environment. But I don't think that you should be wasting one of your testing attempts on just like going in cold.
More often than not does not bode well. I've never, not want to say never, I've had it a couple times, but it's extremely rare for a student to just say, oh, I'm a great student. I'm naturally, inclined to academics. I'm going to take it blindly and I'm going to get my perfect score. It's going to be great. So many times students are extremely humbled. And I think it makes the rest of their testing process even more stressful. They're
Yes.
second guessing themselves, they're second guessing their abilities, they're second guessing everything. And that didn't need to happen. It didn't need to happen. They're not setting themselves up for success at all. Of course, there's outliers. Don't read it, don't believe everything you read on Reddit or see on YouTube. But I don't recommend it overall.
It is something where you do need to like almost learn the exam itself, learn the different strategies, learn not patterns per se, but sometimes there are kind of wrong answer patterns and things like that that you can learn and kind of start to become more aware of. And so some kids do pick that up on their own, which is fantastic. And some kids do need tutoring or to take a class. I think if you are doing it on your own, self motivation is really key. And I think most important is always to reflect on mistakes. You don't just do practice test after practice test and grade them and be like, oh, I got, 1430 on this one, 1470 on this one, but not really understanding why you got that 1430, why you got answers correct, why even whenever you got an answer correct, why you got it correct, because maybe you just guessed. But if you are self-motivated and you can reflect on your mistakes, then I think studying on your own could be totally fine and works for quite a few kids, but not just blindly doing as much test prep material as possible, but really evaluating them and their testing strategies overall. Now, if you do struggle with motivation, like let's be real, it is not fun to do this. It's not fun to study for 7 hours a week or whatever. I'm just keep arbitrarily saying seven. But if you do struggle with motivation and need help to improve like kind of all areas of the SAT, ACT, you're struggling with reading and math, it might be better to take a class. They'll teach you overall strategies. They'll have consistency. They'll make you review your mistakes. They will teach you, I think, a lot of really great things. So those could be really helpful for a student who does need that additional help.
There's so many out there.
Mhm.
There's probably local tutors, there's probably online self-study courses. A lot of this is getting to know yourself as a student, which is only going to help you when you get to college anyway. Understanding your study habits, your preferences. Um, so reach out for help in whatever ways you feel like are going to best suit you.
Yeah, 100%.
This is also something you can start thinking about early or with parents. If you think, hey, I'm gonna want a private tutor. Sometimes they have wait lists. So it may be in ninth grade, you're saying, I'm going to be testing in 2 years. I want to be prepping in 18 months from now, and there may be some type of wait list. So maybe starting to do that research is definitely something you could start to do early.
Yeah, I feel like especially the local ones that,
Yeah.
in person, they only have so many hours in the day. Obviously, like a Princeton review or like Kaplan, they're not going to have these wait lists most
Oh,
of
of course.
but
Yes.
those
Yes.
in-person local ones, absolutely, I could see them really filling up. And ones who are good at their job are going to be filled. So, I think that's such good advice. Once again, planning ahead is really key. And those kids who maybe just need like a little bit of help or thrive better in those one-on-one settings would probably benefit from tutoring. It does tend to be, of course, more expensive because you're paying for a person's time just to be focused on you, but it could have really great dividends overall. Yeah,
Yeah.
virtual tutoring is definitely a thing. Virtual classes are definitely a thing. So figure out what's going to work best for you, and it's not going to be the same for everyone else.
Exactly. Um, but you mentioned this before, there's not a ton of viable test optional schools for BSMD. And even the ones that are test optional, I mean, I feel like we agree on this that we don't really see a ton of acceptances through those. I know you've had some success in the
One,
past
yeah,
years.
just one. And I mean, it's a small study too, because I've had like such few like BSMD students who have gone test optional. And I feel like a lot of the times it's maybe that not that they weren't the strongest student overall, but like maybe something else wasn't super strong with them too. So like it's not like we had a fantastic resume or, a perfect GPA and a ton of APs to kind of, smooth it over a little bit, but maybe they
Yeah.
also have the strongest resume. But
Mhm.
in this case, with my one student who did get into Penn State's program test optional, he was pretty exceptional. He had research. I think he also worked as like an EMT. He's been a couple of years, so now I can't quite remember. He had like a 4.0. Like he did have like a lot of shadowing and volunteering experiences, and so he was able to overcome the low SAT score because he did have strong, or actually we went test optional because his, I guess it was ACT actually was so low that he wouldn't even have qualified for the program. And so that is something that you want to look into and kind of evaluate yourself as a candidate too. Because he did have kind of the whole package. It was just the SAT, ACT score was missing. But yeah, one out of I don't even know how many other kids is not super great. Because I really think it's only Penn State, UPitt is test optional, I think still, Brown, University of Arizona. I honestly can't think of really anything else off the top of my head, but it's just not a lot of options. So if you are BSMD, you want to have like the best opportunities available to yourself, definitely the test is going to be needed. And this is becoming more and more true too for like top schools as well, like non-BSMD schools. I've noticed that more and more are starting to require tests. It seems
Yes.
a lot of like Texas schools are starting to require tests, Florida schools, Georgia schools, a lot of like our southern ones are. But then even some of your Ivies are starting to require it. Not all, but some.
Even state schools,
Yeah.
they want these numbers, they want these tests. So take it seriously.
Yeah, take it seriously. Oh, and one thing I should have mentioned too about the timeline. One reason I also like kids to kind of take it before their junior year is because you're taking your PSAT in your junior year. That's the one where you can qualify for the National Merit like scholarship. The PSAT and SAT are really similar. And so if you're studying for one, you're really studying for both. And so if you can do well on the SAT, you very well could do well in your PSAT and potentially qualify. You do have to be fantastic on the PSAT. Like it's like the top like 3% or like commended and like the or finalist or whatever it is, up 1 to 3%. I'm not even sure what the number is. You do have to be fantastic, but um that could be something that if you are kind of incorporating that timeline into your testing plan, that could be something that could be like almost like a 2-for-1 type deal where you're studying for your SAT, but also hopefully getting qualified for the national merit.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great point.
What about the optional science and optional writing?
I get a lot of those questions. So SAT, I'm sorry, ACT is now giving the science portion as optional, similarly to how the SAT does the writing portion is optional. Generally, it's going to depend on you. If you're listening to this because you're a BSMD student or you want to be a BSMD candidate, absolutely take the science on the ACT. It is not what a lot of people think. Most kids do the best on that section, even if they're not major or have a STEM interest. Um, it's much more reading comprehension and analyzing than it is knowing like true science
Mhm.
knowledge or fact. So I always recommend science to everybody. Writing on the SAT, no. At this point, we've kind of trended in the regard that no one's really taking writing anymore. A lot of schools are not. None of them really require it. You're writing enough essays as it is for college admissions, so they don't really care much about it. So no for writing, yes for science, even if you're not a BSMD student.
Yeah, and I don't think any colleges require like the essay section.
No,
And I
no.
remember now if the SAT even has that section, they might have gotten rid of it altogether. The
What they're changing. Yeah.
think so. I can't remember now, but the ACT definitely still has it. At least they did before spring of 2025. And so no schools require it though. So it's not something you need to worry about. And yeah, you'll be showcasing them your writing skills more. So I think that's kind of it. Do you have anything else you want to add, Nicole?
No, I don't think so.
Same for me, yeah. So that's going to be it for us on the SAT versus the ACT. At the end of the day, there's no one right answer. Go with your strengths, plan early, and do well in your exams, and hopefully you'll have a successful admission cycle and just evolve as your score does too, and kind of figure out what's going to be the best fit for you as you go through. We'll see you next time, everyone. And if you have any questions, just let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe.